Hi, this is Randy Randall of No Age and host of the podcast Hyphenate with Randy Randall. I want to welcome our newest sponsor of the show, DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and artists keep 100% of their royalties. Hyphenate listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/HYPHENATE. Go get your music streaming everywhere now. Yo, Mr. Aaron Farley. Thank you for joining me here on Hyphenate Halftime. How you doing, man?
What's up, Randy? How are you?
Coming in very low key this morning. I'm good. I'm just feeling sick.
Yes,
it's all the fun stuff of being sick.
Uh-oh. I think I might have just lost you.
Am I back? You're back. We're back.
Okay, there we go. Yes,
Yeah.
We're back. Yes. Yes, low key, which is good. It's good to be low key for such an intense band that we're going to be talking about. Oh my God.
Yes. Tell me about KENmode, about Jesse Matthewson. What did you think? What did you think of the interview? What did you think of his band?
Oh man, I thought the interview was awesome. I think it encapsulated a lot of things that men and women of our age are currently experiencing, I think. Although he has the protection of being in Canada, which I think allows for a little bit more of like a feeling of comfort, it sounds like. Just in general, just a little bit. There's like, I feel like every time you talk to someone from Canada, or maybe even Australia, there's like a little bit more of comfort and relaxation in their voice. Of
just like 10% more like my government is not trying to actively murder me at all times.
Yeah. At least like I feel like my government or their government is actively trying to keep them alive.
And not profit off of their pain and suffering.
Even if it's for them to just pay those extra 20% taxes. Like we actually need you alive because you put more taxes into our economy, whereas in the US it's like, you're not paying that many taxes compared to everyone else anyway, so just keep getting more poor. We're getting it from we have other revenue streams.
Wow. Yeah, I like
but I like starting it out nice and happy, fresh.
Oh my gosh. No, he seemed super, super cool. I mean, I wasn't sure from hearing the music and knowing the music before if he was going to be super intense,
Yeah.
But he was awesome. He seemed very, very well put together. Maybe the 10% Canadian and 10% just healthy living look like he's a man who keeps himself in shape.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, I thought it was really cool. And again, I hadn't heard of the band. And so I listened to in the past, if I hadn't heard of the band, I listened to the whole podcast and then listened to the band afterwards. But this one from the conversation, about 3/4 of the way through, I actually had to pause the podcast and listen to the music because I was like, okay, I gotta hear, because his, like you said, like his demeanor and his voice, is like happy guy, but funny, self-deprecating, kind of like talking about business a lot and all of these things. And then when I think it was when you said, it's kind of reminds me of an amphetamine reptile, like the locust. And I was like, whoa. Wait, what? No, that's not what I was waiting for, especially with the name KENmode and all that. And I was like, okay, I got to go listen to it. Then, man, I don't know how I missed this band. It's like definitely right down my alley.
I know, right?
Of like what I was even listening to at that time in the early 2000s of like Cave In and Dillinger Escape Plan and the Locust and Melvins and any of those heavy bands. God, I'm trying to think of what was the band of Thrones
Oh my God, yeah.
Like I was into all of that. Like if it was weird and heavy and anywhere close to metal, I was there. I was like ready to go. So then when I listened to it, I just went through all the songs and I was like, oh my God, 1,000 chord changes or timing changes, like a billion chords and notes in one song, pack as much in as possible, can barely understand the lyrics. Like, how did I miss it? But it's so good though. So good. Like even when you guys were talking about the first record and he was like, oh, I wish we would have had a producer or like a little bit better of a recording situation. But I went back and listened to that one and I was like, no,
I like that
is a
record.
great, it's
Right?
a great
Yeah,
record.
I
Yeah.
know.
I
I'm
mean, I
with
feel
you.
like I was in that, we were in that stage when we first started the band of like, absolutely had no idea what we were doing. And so we were like, well, I guess these notes sound good after these notes and this part, maybe we should go slower here and then speed it up. And then, it's like, so I definitely feel the like, it felt like a very organic craziness.
Yeah, no, I like that first record. When I was going back, I I hadn't heard that one before. Doing the interview, and I was prepping for the interview, I went back. I was like, oh wow, yeah, it's like kind of high pitched voice, just the younger sounding voice and everything. But
Yeah.
it was super fun. No, I feel like KENmode, I definitely was aware of them. Around the time when we were doing Wives, and I feel like some of the other bands they were playing with at that time, I think it all sort of had that kind of early aughts, sort of heavier, sort of amphetamine reptile-y sounding, but also locust blast beats and this kind of
Yeah.
sort of wildness. I feel like there was a bigger sort of scene of that.
Yeah. And speaking of scenes, I loved when he was talking about how they don't really fit in and that like how they're always stuck in between all these different genres, which I think is interesting about music. And I think that is what maybe with younger people now, that stuff just doesn't, like, they don't even react as much to genre. I mean, maybe for throwback stuff. Like I know a bunch of kids are into like 90s and early 2000s emo right now and
Yeah.
getting into all that stuff, but I do think that for the most part, all those the genres are kind of flattening out. But I thought it was interesting when he was talking about metal and that it's it's I had never thought of it as being kind of ageless, but it's so true.
Right. Yeah.
It's like
That's
one of the only ones. Like if you saw like two 70-year-olds getting up and playing like sick riffs, and no matter what they look like, people wouldn't care. Like it's all about the riffs.
yeah. There's definitely something but it's so funny too with metal because I feel like there is such a premium placed on appearance. You know what I mean? And maybe it's not that it's not that it's judgy or that it's like a competition, but in terms
Yeah.
a true metal fan, you'd probably be able to pick them out of a crowd, or what you'd imagine. There's some form of black
Yeah.
material and perhaps a patch or two, and
Yeah.
but but at the same time, it being like, fuck it, yeah, it doesn't matter what you look like,
Yeah.
if it's heavy and it's good, then it's good.
Like the look just adds to it.
Yeah.
But really there's like, it made me think too. It's like, well, what is that? Like I think like rap and hip hop is very grounded in now. Like it's like what's
Contemporary.
happening now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
contemporary. And say like Devo or that kind of stuff is like based in this kind of, I don't know, like futuristic kind of smarter than everybody thing. There's
Like
like an
new wave
intelligence.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like new wave, but you had to be like into it. Like you had to be intelligent. You had to understand the quirkiness and all that. And metal kind of exists almost as like the same way that Harry Potter exists.
Ooh, tell me more about
Like
this. I like this.
it's fantasy.
Harry
Like
Potter
metal,
metal. I want to hear a Harry
but
Potter metal band.
it's like fantasy. It's like you
Right.
can sing about anything with metal, and you don't really sing. It's not really political
Oh,
because
I see. Right.
it's like now doesn't even exist. What we're talking about is when we're going to be riding through the forest on unicorns. That's where we are in our minds right now, and we're all here. We're all together,
Right.
and we're like, we're all kind of accepting the narrative that real life doesn't
Is a
matter,
construct. Yeah.
and that there's this like metal version of life that's out there somewhere that we're all striving for.
Ooh.
Don't you think?
This, I mean, lyric, but again, I think, I'm, just hyper aware of like metal subgenres. I think there is probably definitely is that area of that.
Yeah,
But I'm thinking, even like Black Sabbath, which I think is sort of the the root text
right.
of all metal. I would imagine I'm placing it somewhere close to there. They had like War Pigs. There was some
Yeah.
kind of like war protesting, and definitely songs about weed, which is I think timeless, and
Yes.
songs about. But I gotta say, yeah, what is the wizard? what are those lyrics with a
I don't even
harmonica in
remember.
it? Oh my god,
I don't even
that's
remember.
I remember driving on tour in Switzerland, and then I think the lyric was like, all of a sudden, a wizard walks by, dun, 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 always laughing, dun, 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 never
Right.
crying. Dun, dun, dun. So like I got nowhere, and I remember being like, yes, I could see
Yeah.
this driving in this van through these like gorgeous like mountain ranges. Like, yeah, all of a sudden a wizard could walk by,
Yeah.
and
You
then that's
never
just
know.
it. Yeah.
Or
So yeah,
maybe we're all wizards.
that's it. Yeah.
Well, and I think maybe that's even it, because when you sang that song, I was like, oh, those are the lyrics. I never
Right.
even
Yeah. Maybe
listened
even
to it,
listen to it. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
because it was like it just sounded so great, and his voice is so great. I was like, he could be singing anything. This
Doesn't
just sounds
matter. Yeah.
amazing.
But
It's
then
all about the vibe.
but I think in the same sense of fantasy, you can kind of go Jules Verne as well, like Iron Man. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, this giant, like
Exactly.
kind of post-apocalyptic or, utopian, post-utopian sort of like descriptions of technology taking over. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Well,
in.
and
I'm
even, I mean, War Pigs could be about the Vikings too. You don't.
sure. All right.
It's not like he's not like this singing necessarily just about the people, in the '60s and the government and how bad they're being screwed. They're talking about like society as a whole,
Yeah.
and yeah, who knows?
It's
I don't
funny.
know.
I feel like I relate to metal in the same way I relate to horror movies, in
Right?
that I would say I'm a fan, but I'm not like a real fan. I'm like a
Yeah,
peripheral sort of fan. I think I still have so much
100%.
of the Gen X-ness, irony, everything's is ironic to me.
Yeah,
Appreciation where I can watch like a Friday the 13th film, but it's like feel like I'm watching it as a meta text. Like I'm not really appreciating it for what it is. Like I'm
totally.
seeing the 80s the haircuts or the production value or the
Yeah,
bad effects of it all. Like I'm not really, I feel like I have, and I don't know if it's just my hipster, sort of, you know, genetic origins coming from this kind of alternative 90s reading of the world, but but I also don't like anything that's too scary. It's like I like the horror movie that's
yeah,
kind of spooky, and I think I'd
yeah,
probably be the same thing with metal. Like if metal's kind of spooky, that's fun, but I don't want to watch like Saw or Hostel or any kind of like torture porn in the same way I wouldn't want any kind
no,
of metal that's sort of too intense or too scary.
you're
Something
not
kind
going
of
to like the
poppy.
Black Death, black metal, like coming in from Sweden and throwing pig's
Probably
blood all over
not.
the crowd.
No. Well, see,
No.
yeah, I don't know if I've told this story on the pod yet, or if it's coming up in one of these other interviews. But when Dean and I were in New Zealand for the last tour we did there, we played this venue, and we got picked up from the airport and like taken to the venue, and oh, it just smelled horrible. And they're like, oh yeah, sorry about that. There was a band from Norway here last night, and they had pig's blood everywhere. It just, but the I don't know what pig's
Oh,
blood smells like fresh, but the day after when it's just been sitting overnight and then kind of
oh,
cooking in the sun all that morning, and we get there about 4 or 5 o'clock to sound check, and it's still, and I think they had carpet on the stage or something. It was really,
oh
really
my God.
rancid. It was really rough. Um,
Yeah. So
but
that's not the kind of metal you're into.
I don't think so. I don't know. You know what I mean? I say that because I don't think I've ever really given it a fair shot. Maybe if I could find the right way into it. I just think my stomach, I was just so nauseous and so just like, oh, this is fucking gross.
Ugh.
We did play a festival in Norway, in Oslo, and Mayhem played, and I had to get educated about who Mayhem was or is, and I think that they were the band. I think somebody killed somebody in the band, but
Right.
I didn't, but it was a pop festival. Also, we, like Janelle Monáe played or whatever, it was like
Yeah.
whatever it was at the time. But the thing with Mayhem, I just remember the singer had like an octopus on his face. And I don't think it was a real, but it was like a mask that kind of looked like a Clutu, kind of big like octopus face. And then he like gave birth to a globe from it. So this was like, it was kind of more akin to like
It's like
the modern dance or a bad sort of like, art performance of like, dance or abstract dance ideas.
like extreme Alice Cooper or something.
Kind of, yeah. But also all the kick drum just sounded like programmed, like he was just hitting triggers like brr, 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 brr. And I mean, I get there's something, if you're actually playing those like crazy notes, that's one thing, but if you're just hitting like a drum machine that just does 8 kick drums for every one time you hit it, it doesn't, I don't know, and it just felt very gross. Anyway,
everything gets to its extreme at some point and has to be dialed back. What you're really saying is that you never wore tight black pants and had high top ponies, Velcro ponies.
Velcro ponies? What is a Velcro pony?
Do you know ponies? Oh man, pony shoes.
Oh,
do you know their brand of shoes?
I thought you were saying like a ponytail, like in my hair.
Oh, no.
Like put my hair in a ponytail. Oh yeah, no, like the big Jordans or whatever, or the big Reeboks or whatever. But again, now you're in another genre. That's like thrash, right? That's like, I see kids like that's gonna come back, like Metallica from '83 or whatever. Yeah. Like that.
But
look,
see, for me, that was just metal. Yeah,
that was just across.
Like all
that wouldn't change.
All the cool kids. Yeah, but I was in Spokane. I wasn't in like LA, or I wasn't in California.
Right.
Everything hit us way later, and then everything was like all of those genres. Any genre was like completely squished into one. So anything that was close, like I never knew that punk and metal was very separate until I was maybe in my 20s.
Wow.
I never even knew, because it was all like, you'd see it in Thrasher magazine or whatever. And
well, by the late 80s, you had the crossover, of sort of like punk bands became metal bands, or became, because it's more,
But I just remember like my buddy Chris in LA, who I was in the band with and grew up in LA, was a little older than me and would go to Slayer shows. And when they were like a smaller band, or even Metallica, and he was like, oh my God, man, like the punks would not even go to metal shows, and then the metal kids would go to the punk shows, and they'd like stand in front and put their Metallica jackets on so everybody could see. It's like he was like, it was crazy. Like you had to like, well, if you're punk, which metal bands can you go to? But then it ended up that Slayer was the band that, like, if you were into punk and thrash, you could be like, well, Slayer's okay because Dave Lombardo's a drummer, crossover. He used to be in this other band, whatever.
Yeah,
but that's funny though.
I feel like I'm a couple years younger, so I definitely had the hot topification of all of these things. You know what I mean? Where I think a lot of my exposure to punk and metal or goth or anime or whatever was all sort of like at the mall, which instantly just deflated any kind of menace or danger that was maybe originally baked in to these types of things. So there was like, I think I was turned off so much in those crucial early years of like, oh, this is all just mall shit. You know what I mean? Like Metallica, the Misfits, Black Flag, they were all bumper stickers or patches that could be, the same with like the Doors or whatever, they're all kind of like seen on the same, they're all literally being sold off the same racks. So I think I just kind of equated them to the same thing. And I think that's where I kind of opened up a more noisy, I took like the Sonic Youth sort of train down to Noise Town and sort of felt like, okay, these things feel a little bit more underground, or this kind of alternative, like, say like Amphetamine Reptile or Touch and Go, or these kinds of scenes that seemed a little bit more contemporary, underground-ish, that seemed a little bit more dangerous or challenging. And I kind of felt I could feel the heat and the unknownness of that. I was digging. But again, this was like, the inland suburbs of Southern California, whatever. I was making it up as I went. I didn't really have a guideline for it, but yeah, I could. But you think there's just something once it's at the mall, then it's like, okay, it doesn't count.
Well, when you live right near Rhino Records.
Sure.
And
Yes, that was
your
something.
mom is running a skate shop. You have
Yeah.
this like, oh, this is like where you're actually seeing the real people and seeing like the kids coming in and I could see
I
that for
had a
sure.
little bit of a leg up on some of that stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah, but it's definitely interesting. You know, I think it was just always the feeling too. I think as a teenager, I was attracted to the stuff that just like that felt like really like challenging or something. I was just like, oh, like because I think there was a context for all of for those things. You know, like psychedelic music had been co-ops. I don't know. Maybe I also had older brothers too. I was the little brother, so I could see,
Yeah.
you know, like my older brother listening to Jane's Addiction. And it's like, okay, but he's playing a fucking Ibanez. He still looks like a tool. Like that's not, you know what I mean? Like he's got a beret on and like they're wearing makeup. Like they're like Kiss or something, or they look like Warrant or
Oh my
something.
God.
And me in my mind, you know, I was discounting them. But then you'd see like a Sonic Youth or Nirvana with like beat up pawn shoppy looking Fenders, which were like those look really hard to find. Those look like those are real instruments. You know, which is kind of my
oh my God
dickhead kind of like look at things as a teenager
well,
entitled.
I remember,
yeah.
well, because I remember that it would have been like the early 90s, and one of my best friends had just moved up, or someone who became my best friend was moved up from Orange County to live in Spokane. So then he came up, and then he had the Jane's Addiction and the Cult. And that was like, you got to listen to these bands.
Yeah.
But I never knew about any of it. And I was like, oh man, this guy's from California. He must know everything. And then, but it was like Jane's Addiction and seeing them. And it was right before they kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I guess they were probably big on MTV at that point. I don't know. When were those early records? Were late 80s probably,
yeah,
right?
late 80s. Yeah, to me, like Jane's Addiction is really like the line of sort of like the end of one era, like the pre-Nirvana. You know, I feel like Jane's Addiction, and so I think for, you know, right at that age, it's like if you're really into Jane's Addiction, that was like the generation like before mine, and then if you don't give a shit about Jane's Addiction, then you're sort of my generation. It's sort of the last one, you know, and then if you're into like Power Rangers, okay, then you're too young. It's like I have that like that window between. I come between Jane's Addiction and Power Rangers.
The Power Rangers.
Yeah,
that's actually a perfect analogy.
That's where I live. Yeah, that's where my spot.
Yeah, because I was right before. Like I remember him bringing Jane's Addiction and then the Cult, which I was like, okay, this is just weird. It sounds like pop music, but it's like a little weirder. I don't know what this is. But then again, at that point, like I wasn't looking things up, so I didn't even really know what they looked like.
How would you look stuff up though? Yeah, I mean there was, you know, just go to
if it wasn't on
magazine.
MTV or a magazine. And then, you know, each of those bands were in like all the magazines for one cycle whenever their album was coming out. And then that's all you would see of them. But then I remember my buddy Bill Zacapaico bringing into science class, bringing a Green River tape.
Whoa. See, you're Pacific Northwest. Like, you didn't know you were right in the pocket. You were about to be neighbors to the next big thing. You thought you were just out there.
He was into all the punk music, but punk at that time for us in the Northwest ended up being like all these kind of local bands that would come through, which was like Green River and Alice in Chains, who had just were like a glam band, but they were making these songs. And but it was really this Green River tape. And then he was like, yeah, and there's this band Nirvana, and he had like the first like I mean, it must have been a single. I don't know.
Wow.
He played Nirvana for me.
Yeah.
And then why am I forgetting the first Nirvana record?
Bleach.
So he had, and then it was Bleach, and then he's like, and then I remember distinctly driving to school, so I had to have been 16, and parking my dad's truck in the parking lot, and the rock station going, and here's a new band out of Seattle called Nirvana, and Smells Like Teen Spirit coming on, and we're just like, whoa, this is crazy. This is my friend Bill's band that he just showed me. And then I went in, and then I went in tell Bill, I was like, dude, I just heard Nirvana on the radio. He's like, yeah, fuck them.
That's the early adopter. He was the early adopter
Oh
once
my
it had
God.
been co-opted.
Amazing.
by
But he was
the
also
radio.
the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then like a couple years later, he had like Green Day 7 inches, and he had gone to see Green
Okay.
Day, and then
Yeah.
he went to see. I just remember him talking about all these shows, and I'm like, oh, my parents won't let me go to shows.
That's amazing.
And I wasn't. I was too scared to sneak out and go to anything.
Where
So.
would shows like that happen in Spokane? Were they like warehouse shows? Was there a punk place? What was the underground there?
Well, I actually went. I went to a couple local like punk shows. A couple churches would have shows.
Okay.
But then the neo-Nazi skinheads would always show up by
That's
like
fun.
the third band.
Wow. And these were
And
kids, or
then
these were like grown men that would come to fuck with kids at a
I
punk
mean,
show?
they seemed like grown men,
I
but
see.
they were probably
In their
like
20s.
17 to 19,
Okay.
20. Yeah, maybe 20. I mean, at that point, I was probably 17 or 18.
They were contemporaries. They just looked older because they were assholes.
Yeah, and they just were bald and scary, and
Yeah.
like had Nazi tattoos and whatever.
That'll do it.
All that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then I actually at that point, that might have been when I was 18. Yeah, 18, 19. But then they would come in and screw everything up. But they'd get in the pit, and then all of a sudden whatever 16-year-old kid had booked the show would have to like call security, but then the security guard was not as tough as the dudes that just walked in. So then they'd have to just call the cops, and then the last band would never get to play.
Yeah. If you have to call the cops on your own show, you're bummed.
Yeah, it's totally
It's
bummed.
not-
And
it's not working.
that happened more than, I mean, I didn't go to that many shows back then, but it probably happened 75% of the time where the last band just didn't get to play. It was such a bummer.
Oh my God.
Oh, the good
Yeah.
old days.
I know. Well, I've had that experience of like, we're playing on this 5-band bill that starts at 9 p.m. Like, oh shit, we're not going to go on. This probably, we're not going to go on until 2. And by that point, either everyone will be gone or the cops will have shut the place down.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, I'm going to wait to unload until the band before us goes on. I'm just going to leave everything in the van until then. Let's just, let's not get too excited.
Or you see the potential problem come in, like, hey, can we just jump on and do a couple songs real quick?
Oh yeah.
It's like, it might not be going for very long.
Yeah, I remember listening to Gilbert Godfrey, R.I.P.
Yeah.
He had a great podcast, but he said it was his fantasy to always get to a show and then not perform but still get paid. I always remember, I definitely had that thought a lot on like weird shows, like, this is gonna suck. Like, what if they just paid us and we could go home? We didn't actually have to play. And I'm not saying like punk venues. I'm saying even like bigger venues or whatever, whatever the vibe is. If it's just a bummer, like, can we just go home? like, okay, we're just gonna stay here and get paid. But fuck, what if we didn't even have to play? Like, just that fantasy, like right before you go on, like, oh wait, there's been a leak in the plumbing. Like the whole place is closed. We'll pay you. Just go home.
Yeah, like, oh, bummer.
Yeah, like, oh really? Dang, sorry. Well, thanks for having us. Okay, bye.
Well, and that to bring it back to the podcast, I feel like this is half of what the podcast was about too, of like talking about the difficulties of touring and being in a smaller area, but still, I mean, because he's from Winnipeg, right?
Yeah, which is really the middle of nowhere, in Canada's middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
I didn't know. I've never been. Have you ever been there? You were closer up there.
I've been to. I'd have to look on the map because I've been to Eastern Canada once for a photo shoot once in March.
Ooh,
and it was
sounds cold.
It was like, negative 20 Fahrenheit, I think. Wow. And it was sunny out.
Oh.
Like without even wind, it was just like negative 20. And we actually shot some photographed a woman who went out surfing when it was like negative 30.
What? On a lake?
No, in the ocean. We were on the coast for part of it.
I see. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, Winnipeg is
closer to.
Yeah, it's like right above like North Dakota, or even Minneapolis.
Oh, it's in the middle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
No, I've never been to Winnipeg. I've been to Calgary.
Yep. Yeah, I've done that. So Edmonton and Calgary are kind of right above Spokane.
Yeah, Calgary is a little east.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been to the West Coast, like Vancouver and all that.
Yeah, that's easy. That's just Oh,
being
Vancouver's,
outside.
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was gonna be like Vancouver's just like Seattle's like big brother or something, or like a
Yeah.
little bit nicer like half brother. Oh yeah, come
Yeah.
on up here.
Yeah.
It's like Seattle,
It's
but Canada.
yeah. It's a little bit more modern looking in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. It just feels like the air's even cleaner and the food's a little bit better. Just kind of has all that the special Canadian sort of feelings you have. But
Yeah.
whereas like going to Toronto or more Montreal, then you're like, oh, okay, this is like real Canada. This is people with the French accents and then
Yeah.
the poutine and yeah, things are different.
Yeah. You're like, oh, people are kind of angry, like Americans and French people. They add a little bit of like anger and excitement. Whereas everywhere else in Canada, again, it's like
It's
they
just so
get like
nice.
a 10 to 15% more relaxed in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Just not worried. I think that's what
Yeah.
it is. If you don't have worry all the time, it just puts a certain lightness to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was stoked to talk to Jesse, but he seemed to have like a little bit of an edge to him, at least with the, he was talking about like the kind of the ADHD and the Muay Thai kickboxing and sort of the serenity of all that.
Oh yeah.
It seems like that's definitely a good way to sort of treat those, that sort of thing of, you know, like martial arts as sort of form of meditation and sort of get your aggression out that way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think too that I think maybe especially with heavier bands,
Mm-hmm.
I think what doesn't get talked about a lot is how much of a release that is to play live. And that's why a lot of
Yeah.
those guys, even in
Catharsis.
bands, like when you meet guys in bands or women, that they're a lot of times that they're very chill people in general. Especially even heavy bands, you meet people and
Right.
like, oh yeah, hey, what's going on? Blah blah blah. Like I just remember that. Do you know that band Horror? HO9909.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You seen those guys play ever?
I didn't. They were
Most
recording a video down at Gaucho's. They did
just
a music video there. Yeah.
insanity,
I bet. Yeah.
insanity. It's kind of like a '90s version of what we all thought music was gonna be, and then it just took like 30 years for it to happen. But those guys are insane. Like just the live show's insane. It's so loud. The crowd is like the most diverse, insane crowd I've ever seen. All of these things, and then uh, I saw the lead singer out somewhere and went up to him and was like, "Hey man, love your band." And he's like, "Oh dude, thanks so much." Dude, it means so much to me. Super
Oh, yeah.
quiet, but like just the quietest, like, oh man, that's so cool. It means so much. And but I think like, oh yeah, all these heavy bands, I think it's like catharsis. And it's a way
Yeah.
to get that energy out. I mean, I definitely felt that when we would play too. It's like you get up there and it's so loud, and you're like, oh, I just get to jump around and go crazy for like an hour. And then you get down, you're like, whew, that felt good. And it was like, it's just like you get all this stuff out of you. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's same with being at the show or being in a mosh pit or just
right.
kind of losing your shit in public. And it's like
Yeah,
you're sweaty and there's a giant throng of people. And then afterwards it's like, wow, okay. All right. That gets a lot of that sort of dopamine up and sort of your
right.
aggression out and everything you kind of, yeah. Yeah. No, that's so interesting. I think, the other thing I was thinking with him too was like brothers in a band. Like I think the one reason, he was saying that it just kept the KENmode name for so long. It's because it was him and his brother. And then there was just a rotation of bass players or other players. But if you had the singer and the drummer, singer guitars with drums, then it's like, that's a big chunk of the songwriting and the band identity right there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's a cool, I mean, it's like such a cool, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of bad stories about brothers and bands.
Right. I know. I was thinking of that too. Like, yeah, what are the
You got
good, but what are the good
Oasis
examples?
and
Right. But what are the good examples? Like Pantera. I was trying to think like those guys seemed
are
pretty
they
good.
brothers?
Vinny and Dimebag, the drummer and guitar player. They're
Oh, I
brothers.
didn't even know that.
Yeah.
All right.
I know. That was the other route I was going to go down with metal. Was like Pantera metal. Like that's a whole other kind of groove metal thing that,
Yeah. Yeah, I listened to a lot of Pantera, but I wouldn't. Yeah, how would you even classify that? Because they kind of were that in between band of multiple genres. Like they were kind of thrash, but they were slow enough, and then they had the super intricate solos.
Yeah.
So they pulled in that kind of like Aussie
Technical.
Ozzy, Randy Rhoads kind of fans could still sit and listen, but then they had the like 90s groove, heavy groove.
See, because I feel like they sort of came. They were sort of the that like equivalent of Nirvana, or like contemporaries, or even post Nirvana, sort of like big mainstream stuff. But I equate them a lot with like White Zombie, like another
Right,
band kind of around
exactly.
that same, what I mean, where it's just like, it was of the alternative early '90s, but was different. They didn't look like the hair metal bands, or
Yeah.
you had that kind of attitude. Seemed like it was a
Love-
different kind of alternative.
Loved
thing.
White Zombie.
Me too. Have
Oh
we
my
talked
God,
about this?
I think so. Yeah, I used to love. Oh my God, I think I told you this. One of my best friends back then, my like snowboarding buddy Zach, he would always get. I think he had a friend in California. Again, it's all this California,
Sure.
or maybe his cousin lived here or something, and his cousin would send him tapes. Or his friend, I don't know. He would get these tapes, and he got a White Zombie tape that was like
Nice.
handwritten, just said White Zombie on it, and we just listened to it. But this was like in 90.
Oh, so this was the
91.
This was the Caroline record before
Probably
before La Sexorcisto, Devil Music Volume 1.
It was before it got big.
Yeah. So what was that one called? Make
so
Them
we
Die
were just-
Slowly, I think was that one.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it was before all the
blue
MTV
cover.
stuff and everything
Yeah.
else. And so we had this, and we're like, cool. We got this cool tape that I've never heard this band, don't know anything about them, never looked it up. I mean, again, where would you look it up? and then all of a sudden MTV hits, and we're like, wait, that's our band.
That's amazing.
That's our band. That's our band, White Zombie. Like, to us, that was like, we were the only two people who had ever heard of this band ever.
That's amazing.
And then they became massive. Yeah, that's funny.
Well, the Numero did a really cool reissue, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, of all their early stuff, and it's rad to hear the music from that period, but it's also just seeing the photos, because I'd always heard that they had played shows with Sonic Youth and kind of CBGBs in like mid 80s, were sort of part of a downtown sort of art scene, which by the time they came out, it was such this production of makeup and horror movies and all this stuff that kind of seemed so far from whatever hipster cool of Sonic Youth grunge stuff. They seem like they were on this other kind of theatrical thing, but that Numero group stuff, you can kind of hear it. And I honestly think like some of that early stuff, that White Zombie stuff, again kind of puts me in this sort of KENmode sort of world, or even like Wives, what we were doing, a sort of underground sort of sludgy noise rock kind of thing. You're like, oh yeah, I would have played with a band like that for sure, if not being a band like that.
Well, I remember so many bands, or so many bills, the bands were all just really weird. Like, the bands never sounded like each other.
Right.
I mean, the little bands because we were going to shows by the time, I really started going to shows when I was first year in college at Washington State, but it was like 93. So then it was like grunge kind of had happened, and then the big bands got big, and then the smaller bands kind of stayed small, but then it was like Modest Mouse and Built to Spill, and all those bands were starting to come out of that scene. But then you'd see like those bands, but then you'd see like a weird industrial band would open.
Yes.
It was like you'd go out to a field and there'd be like a band playing with grinders on oil drums.
Yes.
And then you'd see like someone play acoustic with crazy lyrics or something, through a distortion pedal, and it's just someone who played their first show, but
yeah.
But it really was like booking for like the vibe booking.
Just whoever was well,
Like,
part
we
of that
just
was
have
just
a-
who was around,
like-
like who could play
like-
the show.
Yeah, and like a vibe of crazy. Like, are you crazy and interesting? All right, you'll play second.
Perfect. Yeah.
Can you get here by 4?
Oh my
Or
god.
can you get here by 8?
Yes.
Do you,
yeah.
do you have your own equipment?
I feel like Dean has tried to keep that alive with a lot of the No Age shows we did on the last couple tours. He'll just try to find some of the again, just kind of a weird vibe, just something different or interesting. And it's like, cool. All right, yeah, they're gonna open up. We had this kid in Philly. I forget how Dean met him. I think he was like, was he selling CDs? Fuck, I don't know. Yeah, but just the kind of, it was almost like a Wesley Willis kind of thing. And you're like, okay, that was cool. Like, I was not expecting
That's
that.
awesome. I love that though, and that, I mean, it kind of comes back to the discussion about touring and like how weird that whole situation of touring is. Like, it's a very strange thing, especially now when there's like, I mean, I guess bands, the majority of the money that you're going to make is off of ticket sales or physical like merch. And so
Yeah.
the only reason, like, unless you have a really um, big online fan base, like, you need to go to everybody's town and get the 50 to 300 people who like you to pay for a ticket, split it with a bar or a club or at a venue, and sell enough T-shirts or whatever to break even to get to the next place. It's like a very crazy life.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it also can like suck a little bit of the fun out of it. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh man, we gotta make sure we promote. You're kind of doing your own promotion too.
Yeah,
But it's like, but again, like, oh, well, is the local opener gonna have the draw? Like, how many people do they get? It's
yeah,
just because again, it's become the only channel, the only revenue sort of channel. So the tour
yeah,
becomes this whole other kind of thing. Whereas it was, kind of treating it like, I don't know, this will be fun. Let's get weird and have fun, and we're just out here having a good time. I think it can kind of take, if
yeah.
when touring or live shows become too serious, then it just feels a little like, I don't know, sanitized or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just takes more and more work to keep coming up with new ideas, more ideas. I mean, I think that too, like when he talked about Melvins being his favorite band, that it made sense because Melvins are like that too. Like every record has a different, like, okay, this time we're gonna have two drummers. And
Right. Yeah.
then,
Or two bass
and I remember,
players. Or
yeah.
two.
And
Yeah.
then I remember when they recorded with Alex Newport years ago, and Alex was telling me, it was like, yeah, they just came in and they're like, okay, let's take all of the microphones that would usually be used for certain instruments and switch them around. So this whole thing, so we're gonna like record the bass drum with an SM58, and we're gonna record the guitars with the like whatever mic and blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and he was like, yeah, that was just like, this is gonna be our idea we're
It was
gonna stick with
the
for this
concept
thing,
record of it all.
and then
Yeah.
we'll just go from there. And then even I know that my friend Jeff used to tour manage for them years and years ago, and he had said like, oh yeah, they would always come up with a great like or a okay, this time we're only going to play in towns that we've never played in before.
Yeah.
which
Sure.
also for the rest of everyone else becomes like, oh, okay, wait, so what do you want me to do? You want me to call like the little town outside of Peoria, Illinois, and see if we can play in the Veterans Hall or whatever,
Yeah.
But to keep it exciting and be like, yeah, well, why else are we here other than like to make some weird art projects that and to try to get as many people to listen to them, and then just so we can get enough money to do the next one,
Yeah. No, I think there's something really, really beautiful about that. Because again, that's just, that's what it is. You just keep the circus moving, keep the
Yeah,
wheels underneath it, keep it going down to the next town. And I think,
yeah,
and there's always time to sort of, I guess that's the other thought too, with it too, is like, boring is always an option. You never,
totally.
that's never off the table. Like, oh, okay, or you just make it boring. But what if we try to make it interesting? Like,
Yeah,
huh? What?
yeah,
But that takes work and effort. Like, I know. So bear with
yeah,
me here, but it might make our lives more
yeah.
entertaining for ourselves. Will it make you
It,
more
it,
money? No, we won't make it. We
no.
might actually make less money.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that's the
But
that's
you'll
the
have a
best
better
part.
you have a more interesting life. What
Yeah,
if your life experience was just that much cooler? Like, oh,
yeah,
okay, I'm with you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting and poor, or
Huh.
boring and less poor.
Yeah, I wonder, right? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
does that equation work out in the long run?
Yeah, real,
But-
really, you're only getting to less poor anyway.
right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, poor to not quite as poor, but
yeah,
but a lot more boring. Like,
yeah.
okay, I see.
So
Well, but I was going to get back to White Zombie. I reached out to Sean Yelset, the bass player from White Zombie, through Instagram. I follow her, and I asked her if she wanted to be a guest on Hyphenate, and
amazing.
but she has not written me back because
Okay.
I don't actually know her. So I
Well,
put this out there, Sean. You are invited to be a guest if you ever wanted to do so, because she's also an amazing graphic designer. She does all kinds of cool graphic design stuff, and she has like wallpaper. She has a whole store there where you could buy Sean Yelset designed things.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
yeah, I know. It looks like I would have to imagine she gets hit up by men my same age, probably about 400 to 500 times a day. It's
I
probably
used to
with
love your band.
yeah, like I had my first crush on you when I saw you on the front of Guitar Player magazine in 1992. Not that I would know anything about that. I would never say
Yeah.
those words out loud, even if I
No.
thought them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think she's reading her DMs or interested. It probably became monotonous like 12 years ago, just
Yeah.
her looking at her own stuff. So throw it out there if anybody knows Sean Yelsa, or if anybody, you know, or if she herself ever hears this. It's an open invitation. I don't know how else to ask her to be on the show. So I'm just going to come out the public plea for
Yeah.
for
That would be amazing. I mean,
yeah.
the story of that band. I'm having a weird memory of being when I was first in LA, because I moved here in 2000, and I think I must have been with Travis Keller. I don't know, but I
Oh yeah.
feel like at one point we showed up at a studio and it was someone who was in White Zombie at some
Really?
point. Yeah, and I was like, oh my, wait,
Like
that's
a
like the
recording
real guy.
studio? Like a recording
Yeah, it was
studio, or
it's like a home recording studio.
okay.
But
Who, the drummer
I,
or the guitar player? I'm trying to who would it have been?
I'd have to look again, but that memory just got jogged, and so I'll have to look it up.
Do you have
But
photos?
no,
Oh, okay.
it's just one of those times. Like I think, especially when I was here. I mean, I was like 25 when I moved, so everything. I just felt like
Yeah.
LA was like. I equated it to living in a cartoon.
You just walk down the street and you're like, "There's Bugs Bunny. There's Yosemite Sam."
First 10 years easily, every time I'd be going like, oh, now I'm out at some club with some person and I'm like taking their picture, and then we're going to this place. I'm like, wait, we're at Wilt Chamberlain's house at a party, and we're like, there's people jumping off the roof into the pool, but nobody owns this house, but somebody's throwing parties here who might have been part of the company who was trying to sell the house,
Oh
and they
my
were just trying to
God.
get people involved. And so you show up and there's like, is that Andy Dick?
Of course
Hey,
it
what's
is. Yes,
Andy Dick doing
absolutely.
here?
Yeah,
And then is
drugs.
that
Drugs. He's always doing
and then
that.
it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things of like, okay, well, that was Thursday.
What happens tomorrow? Oh no, yeah.
Oh my
I'm
God.
having coffee with Lindsay Lohan's sister, brother. Somebody.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh my
I
gosh.
once was at a bar with Keanu Reeves's mom,
There you go. Exactly. Right. Yep.
and it just was just sitting there, and it was like, I found out afterwards. Oh yeah, that's Keanu Reeves' mom. Like, what?
And you
That
do,
lady?
and you have to do that little bit of like abstract, you know, math in your mind, like of celebrity math. Like, what is like cool? Whoa! And you're like, wait, I got to take this way down. I should not be this excited. Like my first response was like, fuck yeah, that's fucking oh. Oh, okay. Wait, hold on. Like, I don't. Keanu's mom's coffee. That's an antidote. Okay, it's not that exciting. Like, you don't have to call
Oh my
your
God.
friends at that moment. Yeah.
No, I'm excited about everything.
Just
All of it.
all of it.
100%.
Everything is at 100. Like, fuck, that's fucking awesome.
I kept it to myself, but the inner excitement of meeting anybody and anything, like even but I get the same excitement from that that I would get of like someone's art who I've seen on Instagram. I'm like, oh my God, I love that person's art. And then you meet them and then the same excitement. I'm like, I still can't believe that. I can't believe I'm meeting you. This is amazing. I just started following you like 5 days ago. This is unreal. This is so cool.
Have you?
I get excited about everything.
Have you experienced the horror in a person's eyes as you light up, as your eyes are lighting up, like, oh wow, hey, you're you, and then you read their facial expression back to you as like, I'm being approached by a monster, like, and you're like. Oh wait, but somebody must be weird, and you're like, oh wait, no, I'm the weird one. I'm far too excited about this encounter because I'm just a stranger to them, and I'm coming off way too hot.
Well, I learned very early to pretend like I don't care.
See, that's the way you do. Yeah, exactly. Because
it took a couple of like, oh my God, let me ask you questions, and I'm like, this person is looking over my shoulder right now. I'm like, oh,
they want to be anywhere other than
the
here.
last thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But then it took because I ended up shooting photos of a couple people who were like, you know, pretty big, and then realizing I remember actually when I was a kid, the first famous person that I met was Craig Kelly, who was like a massive snowboarder. He was like the kind of the biggest snowboarder in all the world at that point. It was like 80, it would have been like 90, 89, 90. So he's like the biggest guy on Burton, like all this whole thing. And he came to our local snowboard shop because Burton was having a thing.
Okay.
And I walked in and he was sitting there and I was the only person. I was the only
Oh.
person that came
Oh.
and was like, and I was like, oh, he's just a guy.
Yeah.
Got it. He's
That's
just
it.
a guy.
Everybody.
And I talked
Everybody
to
were
him
just
for a
guys.
second and I was probably like, it was like 13, 14, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool.
And was like, oh yeah, you're my favorite, but also like I saw you at this contest at the local thing and you gave my friend your bib and you signed it. He's like, oh, I think I remember that.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I was like, that's right. That's so cool. But then talked to him for a couple minutes and again was like, oh, you're just a guy. And I just never forgot that feeling. I don't know why.
That people are just people.
I never saw anybody who was like famous or known for 10 years after that. And then in LA, I still remember every time like I see someone who's like, oh my God, that's the guy. I'm like, nope, it's just Craig Kelly.
It's
I'm
just a person
standing in front of Craig Kelly.
Exactly. and you can have, that's going to help you like 99% of the time, because now you can just have a conversation with a person, with a stranger, because that's all they're doing to you. You are just a stranger to them. So if you come with that same energy, like, hey, stranger, how are you?
Yeah.
Like, good. Yeah. It's the weather. It's the time. Huh? All right. Yeah. Whatever we got.
Yeah. And usually if in the photo days, I always had like, okay, think of 2 questions and have your 2 questions.
Ooh, that's good.
If you really get into a conversation, then you can actually have like a question.
That's good.
But then most of the time, don't talk. Like ask a leading question that will allow them to like talk and then just sit and don't say anything.
What's an example of that? Like, what would you ask?
I would say I actually have a specific example of that because I shot photos of Daniel Lenoir.
Okay, producer extraordinaire, right? Neil Young.
And and Neil Young at the same time. They were both together. And so I was, you hear the stories about Neil Young of like, can be crazy, can also not show up or be completely late all the time.
But you were booked, you were hired as a photographer on the job to shoot them.
Yeah, it was just to shout portraits of them
but you have a reason. You have a reason to be there. You're not bumping into them at a coffee shop. This is you're hired on as a job, with a role to. Okay. Very cool.
I don't have like 100 questions for each celebrity who I might bump into.
Okay, that's just checking. Like, just have a couple questions in my pocket. Like, Charlize Theron's dog walker. Cool, man. What's up? So, how do you feel about Palestine? Right?
Yeah, right. But then, my only question was from shoot. I'm gonna have to ask you. You'll know the movie. What's the Jim Jarmusch movie? The Train. With Johnny Depp in it.
Oh, Dead Man. Yeah. He did that soundtrack. It's amazing. Yeah.
Him and Neil Young did the soundtrack,
it's
right?
Gorgeous.
And I had seen photos of it and stuff, and I had just asked him, I was like, okay, well, if we're talking about it, I just want to ask the question about how they did the soundtrack to Dead Man.
Cool.
And then I actually asked, and then had like, there was a little like, well, we watched it live and we did like multiple takes, but it was all done live. And then Neil would have all of these amps set around in a circle with different guitars on them. And he'd just like play different guitars and go back and forth. And I was like, oh, cool. But it kind of like, I was like, oh, okay, this guy's not like someone who doesn't know anything. But then I just didn't talk most of the time. Although the best thing was, right, I was shooting a bunch of photos and Neil Young, he's like, you sure are shooting a lot of photos.
says the talent to the photographer who's hired to shoot photos. Like, yes, Mr. Young, that's all I'm here to do, is to shoot all of these photos.
You sure are shooting a lot of photos. This is when do you know when you're done? And I'm like, I don't know. When do you know when you're done recording a song?
Ooh.
And I mean, I didn't say it in that way. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. When do you know when you're done recording a song? And he's like, good point.
Whoa.
And then I kept
Touche.
and I kept shooting photos. Yeah,
That's
but
incredible.
I got it was like I think I got like 15 minutes maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm gonna shoot until somebody pulls you out of here, or you walk out of the room. Otherwise, yeah.
And he was like, he got there 2 hours late, and then he went in and had lunch for 4 hours.
Whoa.
I think 3 hours, 4 hours. And then he really wanted his like electric. He had made like he had a Cadillac, and he had put an electric engine in it or something.
Sure.
And he's like, I think I want to do the photos in my electric Cadillac. And he told that to somebody, and I was like, did he bring it? And they're like, he didn't bring it, so we might be trying to get it from his ranch.
No.
And I'm like, oh my god, you guys, I have to fly out of here in like an hour. I literally flew into San Francisco for like, I was supposed to be there for like 4 hours and then fly back. And I had flown in, and I was just looking, and I was like, oh my god, I've got like 2 hours. But we did it.
Did you get pictures of the Cadillac?
No, he's like, we don't need the Cadillac. Oh, we'll be fine. Let's stay. But it was like in the redwoods. Yeah, it was nice.
Sounds gorgeous.
Yeah, it's cool.
How fun.
But anyway, all of those, I still get so excited. I mean, I'm still like a little kid from Spokane who never thought he would leave Spokane, you know?
Yeah.
So like all of these, like I love Los Angeles. I love like running around and seeing every time, especially now that I live outside, like an hour outside. Every time I come in, I'm like, oh my god, the fashion is completely changed from like 3 months ago. It's like everybody's wearing these massive shoes now. And it's like they kind of look like somewhere in between like workout clothes and like 90s hip hop. I don't know what's going on.
That's amazing.
But I love it. I still love it. Yeah, all of it.
Oh my god. Well, I think we covered all things KENmode and Jesse Matthewson. I've begun taking notes. I don't know if you can tell while we're talking, just so I have more interesting things to write for the show notes here as we go. So hopefully when I upload these show notes, all these notes will be in there. I have
that's awesome.
Benefits of being Canadian, KENmode song structure, genre blending, metal subgenres, punk versus metal, grunge, heavy band catharsis, heavier the band, the nicer the people, white zombie, celebrity encounters. These are all things we will cover on today's Hyphenate halftime.
Hashtags.
Hashtag, right?
Hashtags.
Yeah. Hashtag celebrities. Hashtag 2024 elections. Hashtag Russian bots. Hashtag
hashtags, do we even exist?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So which reality do we believe in? Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will see you in 2 weeks back here on the channel for another one of these amazing halftime. I'm gonna triple around. Hyphenate halftimes.
Hyphenate halftimes.
Yeah. There we go. So something
I like it.
And then we still have this Gmail address that I think has mostly cobwebs and dust on it, unless I've done something wrong and I don't know how to check it. But it's hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com. If anybody out there would like to connect us to any White Zombie members or any celebrities that we can unregulate our excitement about meeting them.
To be like, yeah, that's great. Tell me more.
Yeah, if you know Mandy Patinkin's shoe cobbler, we would like to meet them and interview them and talk to them. Or if you are Kristen Dunst's TV repairman, we would like to talk to you.
Now that's a conversation.
Yes. Well, I will see you in 2 weeks. Be well until then. All right. See ya. Bye.